Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we're on the flag bridge of Battleship New Jersey. All 4 Iowa-class battleships were outfitted as flagships, and they were heavily used as such throughout their career. A question I'm often asked is why? By the time the Iowa-class battleships enter service, the aircraft carrier has already replaced them as the queen of the fleet. So why did so many admirals choose to fly their flags from Battleship New Jersey? Before that, let me tell you about the battleship's first annual gala. On May 5th, we're hosting our long-awaited gala, which is a awards ceremony for some of the folks that have helped the museum out and some of the leaders in our local community, where we would like to recognize them. As the leader of several fleets of ships and as the home of several leaders of the U.S. Navy, Battleship New Jersey feels like it's part of our duty to recognize leadership in others. And so we're having this awards gala on May 5th. There's a link in the description below if you're interested in buying tickets and joining me there. There will also be some more talked about this at the end of the video. So, why is a battleship a ship type that is generally considered to be going out of favor by mid-1943 when the Iowas enter the fleet, consistently used as a flagship? Battleship New Jersey was even the flagship of an admiral in 1990 in the Persian Gulf. Why is an old ship like this still being used as a flagship? So, before we get to that, let's talk about some of the instances of this ship being used as a flagship, some of the people who made this their home, and then we'll get into my thoughts on that. Battleship New Jersey was first selected as the flagship by Admiral Raymond Spruance. He was commanding 5th Fleet in the South Pacific in early 1944. Spruance came up through the fleet as a cruiser commander. He had commanded the cruisers and destroyers escorting Enterprise as part of Admiral Halsey's task force. So Spruance likes fast gunships. He was never a qualified aviator like Halsey or some of the other fleet admirals. So it makes sense that somebody like Spruance would like an Iowa-class battleship. She is fast like a cruiser, she has heavy gun power, and I get the distinct impression that Spruance never quite felt comfortable riding a bird farm. Next up was Admiral William F. Halsey. Halsey, like most of the other admirals, had grown up serving on pre-dreadnought battleships prior to World War I, and he had really seen just about every ship type by the time he became a fleet admiral. And yet, of all of the ships in 3rd Fleet during the Leyte Gulf operations, he chose New Jersey to be his flagship. Not his beloved Enterprise, which was still a part of the fleet, not any of the more modern carriers, but New Jersey. Spruance again makes New Jersey his 5th Fleet flagship when Halsey and Spruance rotate out, and Spruance is on New Jersey when Japan surrenders. So this was his flagship in the Philippines as the fleet was building for the invasion of Japan, but that invasion was of course called off because of the dropping of the atomic bomb and Japan's surrender. So this was then used as Spruance's flagship when he took over the ships of the occupation force occupying Japan after the war. When Spruance was relieved of command, his Chief of Staff, Admiral Towers, took over command of 5th Fleet and continued to use Battleship New Jersey as his flagship. When New Jersey comes into service during the Korean War, Admiral Joseph Clark, or Jocko Clark, selects New Jersey to be the flagship of 7th Fleet. And this was his flagship when the armistice was reached and the war ended. Now, Clark was an early carrier aviation pioneer. He was the first commanding officer of Yorktown CV-10, and throughout World War II, he used Essex-class aircraft carriers as his flagship. Yet, during the Korean War, command of 7th Fleet rotated through the 4 Iowa-class battleships, depending on which one was off the coast of Korea at the time. In the post-battleship era, by which I mean the Vietnam War in the 1980s, when the battleships kind of surprised people when they came back, they were not set up to be flagships anymore. Many of their flag facilities had been deleted and converted into other things. Famously, the flag cabins got converted into the Combat Engagement Center. Part of the flag bridge gets converted into the computers and safes that hold the guidance equipment for the Tomahawk cruise missiles. So the Navy was not intending these ships to be used as flagships because they didn't want them to be just fancy, expensive yachts that admirals rode around in. And yet, despite this, Admiral Paul Reason, the first African-American 4-star admiral in the Navy, then just the commander of cruisers and destroyers in the Pacific Fleet, made New Jersey his flagship during the 1989 Pacific Fleet exercises that involved New Jersey sailing into the Persian Gulf. Admiral Reason otherwise had not served on battleships before, so he didn't have the same affinity that a Halsey or a Spruance would have had. So why do all of these people consistently choose a ship like New Jersey to be their flagship? Before I answer that question, let's look at some of the reasons why these ships make bad flagships. The main one is their command and control facilities, especially by the 1980s and 90s, are completely outdated. The Navy had issues finding room in the superstructure for all of the antennas for radios and radars and those sorts of command and control pieces of equipment. And so you see things like the disc cone cage antenna attached to the bow, these big whip antennas stapled onto the forward superstructure, and other weird antenna placements around the ship. Despite their size, the superstructure is a relatively narrow affair, especially compared to the ungodly, ugly, blocky superstructures of modern ships like your Ticonderoga-class cruisers that are designed to be used like that in a command and control role. Also, like we've talked about before, the battleships were going out of style. And finally, traditionally, battleships are relatively slow and unmaneuverable ships, and especially in their own time, they were supposed to form the core of the battle line. So many admirals chose to command from cruisers that could more quickly run around the battlefield and give them a better picture and not remove one of their core battleships from the battle line to do that sort of stuff. So with all of that out of the way, why do all these people choose these ships? The main reason is space. The reason why Admiral Clark had to choose an Iowa-class battleship instead of one of his beloved Essex-class carriers is that there was actually room for his entire 7th Fleet staff. The staff of a whole fleet is absolutely huge. They require a lot of radio equipment and radio operators, and these guys are not part of ship's company. So they're all guests who are coming on board in addition to the folks that you need to run the ship. The guys in the engine room, the guys in the guns, the signalmen, all of these different roles that the ship always has to have. So you need a ship that not only has room for all of these guys to sleep at night, but also that has room for these flag officers to be. So the Iowa-class battleships, being the largest battleships the United States ever built, having approximately 1,600 separate compartments, have room for command and control facilities and for extra berthing facilities and everything else. And so that's the main reason you see them used. Also, as the fastest battleship ever built, New Jersey is extremely fast and maneuverable compared to other battleships, even earlier fast battleships. And so a lot of the detractions that you think of when you think of an old slow dreadnought do not apply to a ship like this. Spruance can still race around as if he were in one of his beloved cruisers. Halsey has the room for his big staff. Look at the island of an Essex-class aircraft carrier. It's incredibly small and cramped. Many of them are set up to be flagships, but there isn't a whole heck of a lot of room, and a lot of the flag spaces end up being pushed down in the ship where you can't actually see much. Not only are the flag spaces on the battleship in places where you've got good visibility, you've got good room, you've even got armor plate to protect those critical command and control facilities. Finally, these ships started to lose their importance in naval warfare. And so as the carriers become the core of the battle line, it's not quite a battle line with carriers there, but as they become the frontline vessels and battleships transition out of that role, it's now more important to free up a carrier so that the battleship is the one racing around. And why was New Jersey in particular always chosen for this role? Well, because a lot of other ships in the fleet were already being used as flagships. As the United States Navy grew and expanded, the number of different task forces, squadrons, and fleets expanded as well. So a ton of other ships were being used as flagships in this hierarchy, and Battleship New Jersey was not used as the flagship of a battleship division. That was usually Iowa in her Battleship Division 7. And so she was left available to be the flagship. Many of the aircraft carriers were already the flagship of a carrier division, a task force, a squadron, like all these different sized units, so that by the time you get up this command and control tree to the actual fleet flagship, there are a very small number of ships left to choose from. And New Jersey just happened to be fortunate enough to get that role. And so she ends up as the flagship of 3rd Fleet, 5th Fleet, 7th Fleet, and 2nd Fleet, which I forgot to mention earlier, but she was the flagship of Admiral Charles Wellborn in the 1950s when 2nd Fleet was NATO's strike group during the Cold War. And we've done a number of other videos about individual admirals. Check the link in the description below to see those. There's an entire playlist you can watch through if you're interested in this sort of information. Otherwise, what do you think are reasons that the battleships continued to be used as flagships? Let us know in the comment section down below if you think I forgot something, or you can think of some other reasons, maybe subconscious things that weren't written down. So, Battleship New Jersey is having our first annual gala on May 5th, where we will be awarding a number of local leaders. There are tickets still available, so check the link in the description below for that. I will be there, and we'll be doing a number of other things, both supporting our local community and the proceeds will benefit the ongoing restoration of Battleship New Jersey. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your ongoing support. You can support the museum by supporting our gala in the link below. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.